This is going to be a tough story to tell, and it's going to be even harder to hear. Some of you may feel sickened. Some of you may feel angry. Some of you may want to stop the video or even walk away. I know because that's exactly how I felt when I first learned what happened. But this story can't stay in silence. It can't stay buried beneath the weight of racism, abuse, and injustice. It can't hide any longer in the shadows of Jim Crow. This story has to come forward into the light of truth and dignity. It must be told for every black woman and every black girl who was ever made to feel like they didn't matter, like they didn't exist, like their pain wasn't real, like what happened to them was a lie, like their truth didn't matter. This story is for them, and I'm telling it for them. This is the story of a black girl's pain, a black girl's trauma, and a black girl's truth. We don't know her name. The newspapers never printed it. The court records sealed it. The world moved on without it. She was called the girl, the babysitter, the child, but never by her name. And maybe that's what makes this story so heavy, so painful, so tragic, so gut-wrenching to hear. Because when you don't know her name, she becomes every black girl who was ever hurt and never heard. Every daughter who was ever broken and never believed. Every little girl who was ever violated and never vindicated. Every child whose pain was pushed aside like it didn't matter. They erased her name, but they couldn't erase her story, because we're going to tell it today. So we give her a name, not because it was hers, but because she deserves one, because she mattered, because what happened to her mattered, because she was somebody. And if you feel something stirring in you, if you see her in your mind, if you hear the whisper of someone you once knew, or even if she is you, you are welcome to give her a name too. A name that carries her, a name that loves her, a name that reminds the world that black girls are not disposable, not throwaways. Today, we will give her a name. We call her Rose. And from this point on, that's the name we'll remember. This is Rose's story. While watching this, you may need to take a breath. You may need to pause. As I said before, some of you may even need to stop watching and step away. That's okay. But I ask that you come back, because this story is hard, but it's the truth. And hearing the truth doesn't always feel good. It's not always pretty, but truth telling is necessary. And this truth belongs to Rose, and to every black girl who was ever told that her pain didn't matter. So if you need to step away, I just ask that you please come back. Come back for Rose. Now, let me tell you what happened. As I said a few moments ago, we don't know much about Rose. We know more about what happened to her than who she was. But I do want to tell you the little bit that I do know about her. I want to give you as much about her as I can so that you can see Rose for who she was before this. She was 14 and the oldest of 5 children. She was in the 9th grade at Lanier High School. She lived with her mother and her father in Jackson, Mississippi. Her father was a World War II veteran, and her youngest sibling was just 5 weeks old when this happened. On May 31st, 1951, at 7:30 in the morning, 48-year-old Hugh L. Morrow, an unemployed carpenter, came to Rose's family home on Bank Street in Jackson. He told the family he needed a babysitter for him and his wife while they went fishing. But that wasn't true. Census and ancestry records show that Morrow had only one child, a daughter, born in 1926. By 1951, she would have been around 25 years old, not in need of a babysitter. And the 1950 U.S. Census records show Hugh and his wife Sudie living alone. No children in the home. So Hugh's motives were clear that morning, and they were evil. He already had his plan in mind, and he knew what he wanted. And more importantly, he knew who he wanted, and that was Rose. He wanted access to her. We don't know exactly what he said, what words he used, but we know that he offered money to the family in exchange for Rose to babysit for him. Rose's family clearly needed the money, so her mother said yes and agreed to allow Rose to go with Morrow. As he drove her away from the home, it became clear that she was not going to babysit. He took her to a lake near a wooded area in southwest Jackson. Morrow pulled her down into the seat so she couldn't see where she was being taken. She was fearful and scared and not knowing what was about to happen next. Rose was gripped with terror, the kind of terror that no child should ever experience. The kind of fear that takes your breath away. Once at the lake, that's when it happened. The horror, the brutality, the pain, the fear, the violation. Morrow first took the seat out of his car. He wanted to make sure he had enough room. Then he attacked her. Rose tried to escape Morrow's car twice, but each time he overpowered her. He used his grown man strength to stop this 14-year-old girl. He told her that he would drown her in the lake if she screamed. 14-year-old Rose did the only thing she could. She begged for her life, begged for him to stop, begged for it to stop. The more she begged, the more he threatened to take her life. But he didn't stop. He didn't get off of her. He simply covered her mouth with his hands to quiet her screams and her pleas. He continued his act until he was done. Now, I don't want us to move quickly past this, because what I just said and what you just heard is angering, is sickening, is disturbing, and it happened to a black child. It happened because she lived in a world that did not see her as human. It happened because she was a poor black girl in Mississippi whose family was willing to take a chance on believing this man was honest and that he was actually going to pay them money they would use to feed their family. That's why this happened. Because she was black. He did it because she was black. He had no shame. He didn't hide. He didn't even try to cover it up. Because she was black. He didn't need to. Didn't even think to. Who was going to believe her over him? Once again, because she was black. That is what it meant to be black. Unabashed injustice. Unashamed brutality. Pride and glee in inflicting horror. And what about Rose? What about her? When we tell these stories, we often speak from a distance. We say things like, "That's horrible," or "I can't believe they went through that. How can people be so evil?" We even talk about what we think we would have done. We talk about them in the past tense. We reflect in the past tense. But this happened in real time. People were lynched in real time. People were brutalized in real time. And this happened to Rose in real time. She breathed through every moment of that violation. She had thoughts racing through her mind with every second. What were those thoughts? Perhaps she thought, what is happening? Why is this happening? What is he doing? I want to go home. Where is my daddy? Please stop. No more. A million thoughts, a million fears, racing through her mind at 1,000,000 miles an hour. This is the kind of trauma where tears refuse to fall. The kind of terror that makes you come out of yourself just to survive it. And Rose, she experienced it all. After Morrow was done, he got up. He put the seat back. And he got back in the driver's seat of the car. And he drove Rose back towards her home. He dropped her off a block away. When Rose got out of the car, she was crying and bleeding. She was scared, shaken, injured. When she approached her home, her mother saw her, and she immediately knew what happened. She saw her baby. She saw her beaten, battered and bruised, and crying and scared. And she knew what that man had done to her daughter. And in that moment, there was the pain of two. One who had endured the pain, and one who was carrying the pain of not being able to protect her child. The two meeting at the same time. The two grieving at the same time. A mother searching her child's face for answers she didn't know. And a daughter looking to a mother for protection she couldn't give. When Jim Crow came for black families, he took everything from everyone. No one in the family was spared from his wrath. Rose's mother called the police. Hinds County Sheriff Albert Jones and his deputies came out. They spoke to Rose and she told them what happened. She didn't know Morrow's whereabouts, but she remembered details about his car. She gave a description of Morrow and his license plate number. Rose was also able to lead the deputies back to the wooded area by the lake where it all happened. The plate number that Rose gave was 1 digit off, but the deputies worked to correct that, and that's how they were able to locate Morrow. He was arrested at his home just 4 hours later. When they searched his car, they found Rose's underwear underneath the seat. He didn't even bother to cover his tracks. After he was arrested, Rose was brought to the police station to see if she could identify Morrow. His face was one she could not and would not forget. She picked him out of a lineup of 7 men. When the police interviewed Morrow, he didn't even deny what he did. He signed a confession. He admitted to being with her, but he said that he did not force her. When asked why he went to Rose's home, Morrow said that he had no particular reason and didn't know them at all. He simply drove around the black section of town looking for a young black girl. Rose was later examined by a doctor in Clinton, who said that she had serious injuries and that there was no doubt that she had been violated. Morrow was ordered held without bond. The fact that Hugh Morrow used babysitting as a means to get access to Rose was not uncommon. Black girls and women were often employed in domestic work. Many worked outside the home in white households as maids and as babysitters and washerwomen, or took in clothes to iron. That labor made them vulnerable, not just to economic exploitation, but also to sexual violence. Because to many, the role of a domestic worker came with a twisted assumption that black women and girls were always sexually available, that they couldn't be violated because that's what they were there for. This wasn't just about one girl or one job. It was about a system that put black girls in dangerous situations, not because they were careless, but because they were trying to survive. So many cases of black girls being attacked involved young girls like Rose, whose families were driven by need, and trusted men who should have never been trusted. In 1929, a black woman named Irene Miller answered an inquiry for a maid. She went to the home of a white man named Fred McDonald. He didn't hire her. He violated her. McDonald confessed to the police what he had done, just like Morrow. He even said that he had done it before. All charges against him were dismissed. In 1933, an 11-year-old black girl was violated by her grandmother's white employer while her grandmother worked. Instead of charging the white man, the 11-year-old girl was arrested. In 1949, in Minden, Louisiana, a white plumber offered a 15-year-old black girl a job when he was doing work in her home. He said his wife needed help at their home with their children. The girl's mother needed money for the family and said yes. The man violated her. In Meridian, Mississippi, in 1947, a salesman for a gas company went to a black family's home. He asked the black woman who came to the door if she had a daughter in need of work. He said he would pay the family 70 cents an hour for her work. The man then violated the woman's daughter on the way to his home. What happened to Rose happened to countless black girls and women, over and over again. Even though slavery was over, the belief that a black woman's body was available to anyone at any time had not disappeared. That evil remained, and it continued to cause pain and trauma for black women and black girls. And just like during slavery, no one cared. No one stood up for them. No one stopped it. Black people in Jackson were horrified and outraged by what happened to Rose. They were tired of hearing the same story of injustice and brutality happen to a black girl and a black woman. But they didn't just express outrage, they took action. Black women in Jackson formed the Negro Womanhood Defense Committee. The purpose of this committee was to bring awareness to and support Rose, to support her case, and to demand justice for what happened. It was chaired by Teresa Almore, who was the president of the Parent-Teacher Association, and also by Mrs. E.W. Barker, who was the president of the Jackson Metropolitan Council of the National Council of Negro Women. The committee was made up of prominent black women in Jackson and civic leaders and church clergy. The committee immediately took action. They put out a call to raise $10,000 to support Rose's family and demand that Morrow be prosecuted. And they weren't silent, they weren't scared, and they weren't going to let this happen. Not without a fight. They said enough was enough. Enough with the attacks on black girls and black women. Enough of treating black girls and women as objects to be violated anytime a white man wanted to do so. Enough. And this time, they were determined to be heard. You see, Rose's attack wasn't the first. In fact, it was just one of several attacks on black women and girls by white men in Mississippi that year. In January, 2 white men, Lonnie Bevel and John Stewart, kidnapped a 30-year-old black woman and violated her. Also that year, two white men, Woody McGar and Glenn McCain, went to the home of a 12-year-old black girl from Batesville and asked her mother if she could babysit for McGar's children because his wife worked at night and the children were left alone. The two men then drove the girl to Memphis and took turns with her. She managed to escape only after the men began arguing during the attack. This is why black women in Mississippi were fed up. On June 5, 1951, at the first meeting at Pratt's Memorial Methodist Church, 1,000 black people showed up in the rain. They were teachers and doctors and professors and people from social clubs and lodges. There were men, women, and children. So many people came that the sanctuary was filled to capacity. People spilled into the hallways and onto the church lawn. Black people were upset and fired up over what happened to Rose. Percy Green, who was an activist and the editor of the Jackson Black newspaper, the Jackson Advocate, said that this crime was yet another reason why it was time for black people to register to vote, so they could elect people who would punish white men who attacked their women and girls. Also present at the meeting was a black woman named Rosalie McGee. Just 7 weeks earlier, her husband, Willie McGee, had been executed by the state of Mississippi, wrongly convicted of violating a white woman. Rosalie had fought for years to save him. She watched the state devote every resource, every legal tool, and every ounce of determination toward one goal, his execution. And now, still grieving, she stood with Rose. Because this meeting wasn't just about one girl. It was about the double standard of justice. It was about how the legal system moved mountains to protect white womanhood, but turned its back when black girls were the ones crying out for help. Rosalie's presence made that message clear. That black women were done suffering in silence, that they were done being ignored. The group planned to meet every week until they achieved their goal. Black people supported the committee, but so did white organizations of white people too. Money came in from all over Mississippi. Now, you have to remember, this was 1951 in Mississippi, a state where black people were still lynched for fun. And the law looked the other way when that happened. This was years before Dr. King, before the marches, before the camera showed up. To get 1,000 black people to pack a church and speak out for another black person, it was bold and it was brave. But they did it anyway. They did it for justice. They did it for equality. But most of all, they did it for Rose. It was the Womanhood Defense Committee that checked in on Rose and her family after the attack. A group of black women went to the family's home and talked to them, found out what happened, asked them what they needed. Rose was in very bad condition when they saw her, both physically and mentally. The defense committee was able to get Rose admitted to the Jackson College Hospital. They feared that she might suffer a mental breakdown and wanted her treated immediately. Rose was hospitalized for several weeks after the attack, but when she finally came home, she didn't get better. She got worse. Her family said she began having periods of hysteria and distress, and that her mental health deteriorated. She had to be taken to the Copeland Hospital for further treatment. It was believed that she would need several weeks and possibly months just to get her stabilized. Hugh Morrow not only violated Rose's body, but also her mind. His act of savagery went beyond that horrific morning. And that was the cruelty of Jim Crow and racism, that he was a thief. He stole Rose's innocence, stole her body, stole her peace, and was trying to steal her mind. Morrow broke Rose, then walked away like nothing happened, leaving her to deal with it. And thankfully, that supportive group of black women was there to help, there to guide, and there to support her. Like many black organizations at the time, the Defense Committee was attacked and accused of being puppets of the NAACP and the Civil Rights Congress. This was something that the committee denied. They made it clear that their mission was simple: to help Rose and to see that her attacker was brought to justice. Even when they were being discredited, they stayed focused. They stayed focused on their mission because they weren't fighting for headlines. They were fighting for Rose. Before I get back to what happened next, let me just say this. I really love telling these stories because Black history is so deep, it's so wide, it stretches far beyond the neat little version that they try to squeeze into February. You know the one, where they say, Rosa Parks sat down, black people marched, and then Dr. King told us about his dream. And then all of a sudden, black people got rights. Everything wrapped up in 3 days. No, That's not how it happened. Black people struggled and fought and spoke up and organized for decades. Fought in some way every year of our freedom since emancipation in 1865. Dr. King once said that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And so we must straighten our backs and work for our freedom. A man can't ride you unless your back is bent. And when you see 1,000 people pack a church in Jackson, Mississippi in 1951, that was black people standing tall, not with bent backs, but proud and unshakable and determined to stand for justice and to stand for roles. In late June of 1951, Morrow was indicted by the grand jury for violating roles. At the grand jury proceedings, Rose came to testify, but at the time, she was still hospitalized and recovering from her physical and mental injuries. She was in such bad condition that she had to be brought to the courthouse by ambulance. She gave her testimony to the grand jury from a stretcher. Morrow was supposed to be tried after his indictment, but his trial was postponed because the court's docket was so full. It was full of cases just like his. There was a white man awaiting trial for violating a 12-year-old black girl. So Morrow's case was set to be tried in the next court term in December. The trial began on December 3rd, 1951. Judge M.M. McGowan presided. District Attorney Julian Alexander and County Attorney Hugh Gillespie prosecuted the case for the state. Morrow had 3 attorneys. He was represented by attorney V.J. Strickler Jr., E.B. Todd, and Ernest Sheldon. The judge knew this was going to be a really difficult case because Rose was black and Morrow was white. So he called an additional 45 jurors to report for jury duty, on top of the 30 who had already been summoned. Finding impartial jurors was going to be a tall order. The jury of 12 that was selected were all white men. And because the case involved a minor, the proceedings were closed to the public. Rose was the prosecution's first witness. The stress of it all had taken a toll on her mental health. She was hospitalized for months after the attack. But despite all that she was going through, she came. She confronted Morrow, confronted her fear, confronted having to relive what had been the worst moment of her 14 years of life. She did it anyway, because she had a truth that only she could tell. She told the jury exactly what happened. She told them how Morrow lied to her mother to get access to her, how he drove her to the lake, and he forced her and hurt her, and then dumped her like she was nothing. She told them everything exactly like it happened. Morrow's attorneys did what they always did. They attacked Rose, attacked her character, tried to make her out to be a liar, tried to discredit her, and they did this despite knowing that the so-called consensual encounter that Morrow claimed happened had left Rose hospitalized for weeks. But they didn't let up. They kept trying to get Rose to admit that she consented. Rose broke down in tears from all the harsh questioning by Morrow's attorneys. Rose's mother also testified and told the jury how Morrow lied to her, and this was all a ploy to get her daughter and attack her. The attack on Rose's character was just more of the same when it came to how black women were viewed. During the trial, Rose carried a burden that no one else did, the burden of the Jezebel myth. It was a lie that said that black women were naturally promiscuous, that they always wanted it, that they couldn't be violated because they were never innocent to begin with. This lie was born during slavery, and it lived on in Jim Crow courtrooms like this one. It made Rose a liar the moment she opened her mouth. And that's what made it so evil, because no matter how brutal the attack, no matter how much evidence there was, no matter how broken she was left, they would still find a way to say that it was her fault. And when Morrow took the stand in his own defense, he leaned into the Jezebel myth. He admitted that he had sex with Rose, but he said that it was consensual. The 48-year-old man said that he had a consensual encounter with a 14-year-old. In fact, he said that Rose was the one who asked him for sex, not the other way around. But he didn't stop there. When asked why he covered Rose's mouth with his hand during the attack, he said that he did it so no one would hear what they were doing together. He even admitted that Rose did cry, but he still maintained that what they were doing was 100% consensual. After hearing all the evidence, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before telling the judge it could not reach a verdict. 9 jurors voted to acquit and only 3 voted to convict. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Morrow, despite the fact that he was 48 and Rose was 14, despite the fact that he had never met Rose before this incident, the majority of the jurors didn't care. All they saw was black and white, and there was no way they were going to convict a white man of anything done to a black child. They knew that if Morrow was convicted, it could mean life in prison or the death penalty, and that was a bridge too far for some of them. And with that, the judge declared a mistrial. Even though Morrow had not been held accountable, the fight to convict him was not over. The Negro Womanhood Defense Committee had pledged to continue fighting for Rose and to see Morrow convicted. The state moved quickly to retry him. His second trial started just a week later. The prosecution put on its same case again, the same evidence that pointed towards his guilt. But this time, the jury went even further. After deliberating for 3 hours and 45 minutes, the jury acquitted him, found Hugh Morrow not guilty of violating 14-year-old Rose. The jury sided with him. They said the encounter was consensual, just like Morrow claimed. They said it never happened, that Rose was lying, and she was making it all up. Black people in Jackson were upset, but not surprised. It was another win for Jim Crow, another reminder that when you are black, justice is a fiction. The Jackson Advocate ran a headline that reflected this exact sentiment. It quoted a prominent black Jackson citizen who said that expecting a different verdict was too much to ask, because justice for Rose would have meant that Mississippi was willing to honor the virtue of black womanhood, and that was something that Mississippi was simply unwilling to do. Judge McGowan knew that a white jury in Mississippi would never convict a white man of violating a black girl. It didn't matter what the facts were. It was never going to happen. So, after the not guilty verdict, he ordered that Morrow be immediately charged with engaging in relations with a minor. Remember, Morrow's defense wasn't that it never happened. It was that it was consensual. So, he had already admitted to violating the law. And that meant that a statutory charge could be brought against him. Morrow was released on a $3,000 bond to await the decision and action of a grand jury. Charging Morrow with a statutory crime was something that often happened. White juries refused to convict white men of more serious crimes committed against black women. The belief in the black victim's age was easier for them to accept than the idea that she was telling the truth about what actually happened. When it came to assessing a harsher penalty like life in prison or the death penalty on a white man for what he did to a black female, juries would just refuse to do it. They would refuse to take the word of a black woman over a white man. Remember the case I talked about earlier in the video? The one about the two white men who kidnapped and attacked a black woman on New Year's Eve in 1951? Well, something similar happened there too. The jury refused to convict the white men on the more serious charge of violating the black woman. They acquitted them. But later, the men were charged with kidnapping, and they were convicted on that lesser charge. A special grand jury was convened in December of 1951 and indicted Morrow on the statutory charge. If convicted, he faced a maximum of 5 years in prison, much less than the life sentence or the death penalty that he faced in his first two trials. Morrow's third trial was set to begin in May of 1952, but there is no record of him ever being tried, ever being convicted, ever being held accountable. His case was quietly disposed of. His case was treated the same way that he treated Rose, like it was nothing, not to be taken serious. No harm, no foul. Hugh Morrow died at the age of 81 in 1984. His obituary talked about how he was a husband and a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather. He got dignity in death, but he stole Rose's dignity in life. By the time Hugh died in 1984, if she had lived, Rose would have been around 47 years old. What was her life like? We don't know, but we know this. The pain and the trauma of what she went through, she carried that with her for the rest of her life. Rose is the name that we gave her for this video. But even if we don't know her name, we know her pain. This story was a hard one to tell, but a necessary one. What black people have gone through in this country could fill every book in 1,000 libraries, and there'd still be more plans to build more. How many of those books will be filled with stories like Rose's? This is just one that we've told. How many more have gone untold? How many black women and girls went to their graves carrying the horror and the shame inflicted upon them by Jim Crow? How many more were trapped in their memories? Memories of pain, of trauma, of injustice. Memories of knowing that they got away with it, that no one cared what happened to her. Well, we care. We care what happened to every Rose who ever suffered, to every black woman and girl who was ever made to feel like her body wasn't hers. We care. And not only do we care, but we remember. We remember because forgetting is not an option. We remember because silence is what let it happen in the first place. And we will tell her story, even if we don't know her name. We have to. We must. It's our duty. We owe it to Rose, and to all the others we will never know. We owe it to them to tell their stories. Now I want to hear from you. Had you ever heard this story before, and how did it make you feel learning about it? Drop me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. And please, don't forget to share this story. Keep her memory, her life, and what happened to her alive.